Have you ever opened your front door to someone you trusted, only to realize later that a single decision was about to change everything you thought you knew about your life? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Even now, when I think back to that evening, I still get chills. It started like any other normal day. There was nothing unusual about the weather, nothing strange about my husband's behavior, and certainly nothing that warned me about the shocking events that were waiting just around the corner. My name is Sarah, and for nearly 8 years, I believed I had a happy marriage. My husband, Daniel, was the kind of man everyone seemed to admire. He worked hard, treated people with respect, and had a close group of friends who had been part of his life for as long as I could remember. They were always around for birthdays, barbecues, football games, and family gatherings. Over time, I trusted them almost as much as I trusted my own family. At least, that's what I thought. A few months ago, Daniel told me he would be away for an important business trip. It wasn't unusual. His job occasionally required travel, and I had never had a reason to question him before. The morning he left, everything seemed completely normal. We shared breakfast, exchanged a quick goodbye, and I watched him drive away. What I didn't know was that within hours, I would find myself at the center of a situation I never could have imagined. That evening, as the sun disappeared and darkness settled outside, there was a knock at my door. Standing there were all 3 of Daniel's closest friends. At first, I wasn't surprised. They explained that they had been trying to reach Daniel regarding something important and wondered if I had heard from him. Their concern seemed genuine. They looked worried, almost nervous. Naturally, I invited them inside. Looking back now, I wish I had paid more attention to the little details. The way they exchanged quick glances with each other. The way one of them avoided eye contact. The way the room suddenly felt uncomfortable despite familiar faces sitting on my couch. Something wasn't right. As the conversation continued, strange questions began to surface. Questions that seemed innocent at first but slowly became harder to ignore. My instincts told me something was off, but I couldn't understand what. Then one of them said something that made my heart stop. A single sentence. A sentence that completely contradicted everything my husband had told me before leaving. I remember staring at him, convinced I had heard him wrong. But I hadn't. The silence that followed felt endless. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more frightening than the last. Had my husband lied to me? Was there something everyone knew except me? And why did his friends suddenly look like they regretted saying anything at all? What happened next would uncover secrets, test loyalties, and force me to question whether the life I was living was ever real in the first place. And trust me, when I finally discovered the truth, it was the last thing I expected. I wanted to ask 100 questions at once, but for a few seconds I couldn't say anything. The room felt strangely quiet. The 3 men who had spent years laughing with my husband at family cookouts and holiday dinners suddenly looked uncomfortable sitting across from me. I forced myself to stay calm. "What do you mean?" I finally asked. The friend who had spoken first immediately looked at the others. It was as if he realized he had said something he wasn't supposed to say. One of the men quickly changed the subject and asked if I had heard from Daniel since he left that morning. I told them I hadn't. That answer seemed to make them even more nervous. The conversation continued, but something had changed. Every word felt carefully chosen. Every answer seemed incomplete. I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't telling me everything they knew. For years, Daniel had been an open book. At least that's what I believed. We shared plans, dreams, financial goals, and even the smallest details about our daily lives. That's why this situation made no sense. Why would his friends know something that I didn't? As they talked, my mind drifted back over the past few months. There had been little things. Small moments that seemed meaningless at the time. Late-night phone calls that ended when I entered the room. Unexpected meetings that appeared on his schedule without explanation. Occasional moments when he seemed distracted, staring into space as though he was carrying a burden he couldn't share. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he always smiled and assured me everything was fine. And I believed him. Now I wasn't so sure. The more I thought about it, the more those forgotten details started connecting together like pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. One of his friends suddenly asked if Daniel had left any documents, notes, or messages at home before leaving. The question caught me off guard. Why would they need to know that? I answered honestly and told them I hadn't seen anything unusual. Again, they exchanged another look. Not a friendly look. Not a casual look. It was the kind of look people share when they're worried about what might happen next. A knot formed in my stomach. At that point, I wanted them to leave. Not because I disliked them, but because their presence was making me increasingly uneasy. Yet a part of me wanted them to stay. I needed answers, and somehow I felt those answers were connected to whatever secret they were trying so hard to hide. Then my phone suddenly buzzed on the table. Everyone in the room immediately looked toward it. The reaction was so quick and so intense that it startled me. It was just a message. But judging by the expressions on their faces, they seemed terrified of who it might be from. Slowly, I reached for the phone. And when I looked at the sender's name, my heart began to race. My hands trembled slightly as I unlocked the phone. The message wasn't from Daniel. It came from an unknown number. The text was short. Before you believe anything, make sure you know the whole story. That was it. No name. No explanation. No clue about who had sent it. A chill ran through me. What made it even stranger was the reaction from the three men sitting in my living room. The moment they realized the message wasn't from Daniel, they seemed relieved, but only for a second. Then the nervous expressions returned. I looked up from the screen. "Does this mean anything to you?" I asked. All three immediately shook their heads. Maybe they were telling the truth. Maybe they weren't. At this point, I didn't know what to believe anymore. The trust that had once felt unbreakable was beginning to crack. Questions kept piling up faster than answers. Why were Daniel's friends acting so strangely? Why had someone sent me that message? And why did it feel like everyone knew part of a story that I had somehow been left out of? As the evening continued, I noticed something else. The three friends weren't behaving the same way. One seemed genuinely concerned. Another looked anxious, as if he wanted to leave. The third barely spoke at all, spending most of his time staring at the floor. It made me wonder if they were all keeping the same secret or if each of them knew different pieces of it. That thought stayed with me. If Daniel was hiding something, how long had it been going on? Weeks? Months? Even longer? The uncertainty was becoming harder to ignore. Then another memory surfaced. Just a week before his trip, I had accidentally walked into Daniel's home office late at night. He had quickly minimized something on his computer screen. At the time, he laughed it off and said he was working on a surprise project. Back then, I didn't think twice about it. Now, that moment felt important. Very important. And deep down, I was starting to fear that whatever was hidden behind all these strange events was much bigger than I had imagined. The longer I sat there, the more impossible it became to ignore the feeling that I was standing at the edge of something life-changing. I excused myself and walked toward Daniel's office. Behind me, the conversation among his friends stopped completely. The sudden silence was louder than any words they could have spoken. When I entered the room, everything looked exactly as it always had. The desk was organized. The shelves were neat. Family photos still sat in their usual places. Yet somehow the room felt different now, as if I was seeing it through completely new eyes. I turned on his computer. My heart pounded while it loaded. Part of me hoped I would find nothing unusual. I wanted all of this to be a misunderstanding. I wanted to laugh about it later and feel foolish for ever doubting my husband. But another part of me feared that the answers were waiting somewhere inside that room. As I searched through files and folders, I heard quiet voices coming from the living room. Daniel's friends were arguing. Not loudly. Just enough for me to notice. The tension between them had clearly grown. One voice sounded frustrated. Another sounded worried. And then I heard a sentence that made me freeze. "We should have told her sooner." The room suddenly felt colder. Told me what? I slowly stepped toward the office door, trying to hear more, but the conversation stopped the moment the floor creaked beneath my feet. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated again. Another message from the same unknown number. This one was different. It contained an address. Nothing else. No explanation. No instructions. Just an address I recognized immediately. My stomach dropped. I had seen that location before. Not recently. Months ago. And somehow it was connected to a conversation Daniel and I had that he never wanted to discuss again. At that exact moment, one of his friends appeared in the doorway. The expression on his face told me everything. He knew what was happening. He knew why that address mattered. And for the first time all night, it looked like he had finally decided whether or not to tell me the truth. I stared at him. He stared back at me. Then he slowly opened his mouth to speak. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The friend standing in the doorway looked exhausted, as if he had been carrying a secret for far too long. His eyes shifted from me to the phone still in my hand. "You need to be careful," he finally said. That wasn't the answer I expected. Careful of what? Before I could ask another question, one of the other friends called his name from the living room. The warning in that voice was impossible to miss. It was as if they didn't want him talking to me alone. The tension in the house had become unbearable. I stepped closer. "Tell me what's going on," I said. No more half-truths. For a second, it looked like he was about to reveal everything. Then his expression changed. Whatever he had decided to say disappeared. "I can't," he replied quietly. That answer only made things worse. My eyes drifted back to the address in the message. The location haunted me. Months earlier, Daniel had received a phone call that completely changed his mood. After that call, he had driven to that exact address. When he returned home, he was distracted and unusually quiet. Every time I asked about it, he brushed the subject aside. At the time, I respected his privacy. Now I regretted it. As I stood there trying to connect the pieces, another realization hit me. The anonymous messages weren't random. Whoever was sending them knew details about my life. Details that very few people could know. That meant one of two things. Either the sender was extremely close to Daniel, or they were watching everything unfold. The thought sent a chill through me. Then something happened that changed the entire situation. One of Daniel's friends accidentally knocked over a small bag he had brought into the house. Several papers spilled onto the floor. Everyone reacted instantly. Too instantly. The room erupted into panic as they rushed to collect the documents before I could see them. But not before one page slid across the floor and stopped near my feet. I picked it up. The moment I looked at it, my pulse began racing. At the top of the page was Daniel's name. Below it was a date. And beneath that was information that directly connected him to the mysterious address from the text message. The three friends froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Because we all knew there was no pretending anymore. Whatever Daniel had been hiding was bigger than any of us had imagined. And for the first time, I realized his friends might not be searching for answers. They might be trying to stop me from finding them. I looked from the document to Daniel's friends and back again. "No more secrets," I said firmly. "Tell me everything." For a few moments, nobody spoke. Then the friend who had tried to warn me earlier finally stepped forward. "The truth," he explained, "was not what I had been imagining all night. Months ago, Daniel had become involved in a private project connected to that address. It wasn't a business trip, a hidden relationship, or anything dangerous. It was something deeply personal that he had chosen to keep secret until the right moment. The document in my hand was part of that project." As he spoke, the pieces slowly started falling into place. The late-night phone calls. The unexplained meetings. The secret trips. The strange behavior. It had all been connected. But if that was true, why had everyone been acting so nervous? The answer came quickly. Because something had gone wrong. Very wrong. The project Daniel had spent months preparing was supposed to remain completely hidden until he could reveal it himself. The anonymous messages had disrupted everything. His friends had been trying to protect the surprise while also figuring out who was leaking information. Just then, my phone buzzed again. Another message. This time it contained only 3 words. Go there now. The room fell silent. Daniel's friends exchanged uncertain looks. After everything that had happened, there was only one way to get answers. We drove to the address together. The entire journey felt unreal. My emotions shifted between fear, confusion, frustration, and curiosity. I still didn't know who had been sending the messages or why they seemed determined to push me toward the location. When we finally arrived, I could hardly believe what I was seeing. The building had been completely transformed. Inside were photographs, memories, letters, and plans that Daniel had quietly collected over the years. Every corner reflected moments from our life together. It was clear that he had invested an incredible amount of time and effort into creating something meaningful. And standing in the center of it all was Daniel. The moment he saw me, his expression changed from excitement to complete shock. I wasn't supposed to be there yet. The surprise had been ruined. For a second, nobody moved. Then Daniel looked past me toward his 3 friends. And that's when the final twist emerged. One of them lowered his head. Because the anonymous messages hadn't come from a stranger. They hadn't come from someone watching us. They had come from one of Daniel's closest friends all along. The very person helping protect the secret had secretly revealed it piece by piece, believing I deserved to know the truth sooner. And in that moment, everyone realized that the greatest mystery wasn't what Daniel had been hiding. It was why a trusted friend had decided to betray the secret in the first place. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had happened that night. Daniel looked at his friend, waiting for an explanation. The rest of us did the same. Finally, the friend took a deep breath and admitted the truth. He said he had struggled with the secret for months. He understood that Daniel wanted the surprise to be perfect, but he also knew how confused and worried I had become. When he saw the stress growing between us, he convinced himself that I deserved some answers. At first, he only intended to leave small clues. But once he started, things spiraled further than he expected. The anonymous messages were never meant to cause fear. They were meant to guide me toward the truth. Unfortunately, they had done the exact opposite. For a moment, nobody knew what to say. Then Daniel did something I didn't expect. Instead of getting angry, he smiled. Not because the surprise had been ruined, but because the misunderstanding was finally over. The tension that had built for months suddenly disappeared. As we walked through the building together, Daniel showed me everything he had been working on. The project was far more meaningful than I had imagined. It represented years of memories, dreams, and plans for our future. Every photograph, every letter, and every detail had been chosen with care. For the first time all night, I felt relief. The mystery was solved. The secrets finally made sense. The strange behavior, the late-night phone calls, the hidden meetings, and even the nervous reactions from his friends all connected back to one complicated but heartfelt plan. Later that evening, the 5 of us sat together and talked openly about everything that had happened. Questions were answered. Misunderstandings were cleared up. Even the friend responsible for the messages apologized sincerely. What started as a night filled with suspicion and uncertainty ended with honesty and understanding. Driving home with Daniel, I stared out the window and thought about how close I had come to believing the worst. Sometimes the biggest mysteries aren't created by bad intentions. Sometimes they're created by silence, assumptions, and incomplete information. That experience taught me something I'll never forget. Trust isn't about knowing every detail of someone's life. It's about having faith in the people you love while still communicating openly when something feels wrong. Looking back now, I can finally laugh at how unbelievable the entire situation was. What began as a shocking true story involving my husband's 3 friends turned into a lesson about trust, friendship, communication, and the importance of seeking the full story before jumping to conclusions. And in the end, that unexpected night brought all of us closer than ever before.